All right. Well, I'm bored, so we're doing a video. Today I will be talking about how to get Windows Server running for free in a virtual machine. Just on your computer. You're gonna need probably something with like 8 cores and 16 gigs of RAM for this to make any sort of sense. Minimum. Though you can get by on probably you should have 16 gigs of RAM for anything these days. But you can get by on like 4 cores. It's just gonna drop everything to a crawl on your machine. But if you really want to, you can. All right. So the first thing you're gonna need to do is download this, and then you're gonna scroll down here and download this. This is on the virtualbox.org/wiki/downloads page. This is the main piece of software you're going to need, and then this is the extension which you're going to want. When Windows Server is running inside a VM, it does kooky things, and having this installed kind of cuts down on some of those bugs. So we're going to want that. Once you have that, you're going to want to install this one first, and then open this. I believe it asks you for you to agree to a license agreement, so you agree to that if it's there, and then you install this. You, I think, can double click this and it'll install, but if it doesn't, you just drag it into this. Well, no, I guess you don't drag it into this window. Yeah, so you just double click it. So once you have that done, you might think that you may already just be able to start a virtual machine, set one up and start it. But if you go to do that, and we'll get to how to do that in a minute. If you go to do that and you can't, something that it'll give you an error message about something being unavailable. I believe, I can't recall what it is. It's VM something or other. And basically what that is on your CPU, in your BIOS, on your CPU, there is a component that supports virtualization, having multiple hosts run on the same machine. And it's not always enabled by default. Many machines it is. For whatever reason, mine, I built myself, and it came with I believe a gigabyte motherboard that for whatever reason had that off, and that's always scary because it's like, well, can my computer support it at all? And then you go in and you turn it on. So if it's not working because of that, the name of the setting is going to involve on an Intel virtualization technology, or Intel VT is usually how it's abbreviated. And then on AMD, it's going to be AMD Virtualization, so AMD-V, or Secure VM. This one is the one that is on my motherboard, and they mean the same thing. If you are concerned or lost, you just Google the name of your motherboard. So like, if you have like an HP G something, whatever, it will, you just Google the model of the computer, and then if you have AMD, you Google these, and if you have Intel, you Google this along with it, and it'll tell you how to turn it on usually. If you have a computer that you've built yourself, you just use the motherboard model instead of the model of the PC. So there's that. So assuming that you have downloaded and installed this, installed that, and that you've checked and made sure virtualization is enabled on your motherboard and CPU, are enabled and supported, then we just start out. Oh, there's one more thing to download, actually. So we're going to want a copy of Windows Server. I'm going to be using Windows Server 2025 for this example. Windows Server has very long support cycles. Um, Windows Server 2022 is still supported till October of this year, mid-October, and that's for mainstream support, where they will include additional features, though I don't know what those could possibly be. And then security updates will continue through October 2031. That's usually sufficient for most people, but if you just want the newest thing, or you want to make sure that you have support for the longest time, November Windows Server 2025 end of life is November 2029, mid-November again, instead of mid-October. And then security updates through November of 2034. So there's no reason not to use this one. There's no reason not to use this one other than it won't be supported as long. If you're following this tutorial, you're probably just interested in playing around, or you need it for studying or experimentation. So honestly, whichever one you want is fine. Yeah, so we'll go on from here. So that's part of the choice. The other part of the choice of which two to use is you can see that there's a line, or there's a bunch of stuff here, and then there's one less line of things that need to be supported here. Yeah, is that one or two less lines? That's two less lines. So Windows Server requires, it's actually doesn't require much in the realm of CPU or RAM, which tells us that Microsoft is just adding so much stuff to the consumer version of Windows that it doesn't really need to have to start out with. And the requirements for 2022 and 2025 are the same, except for there are these things called instruction sets, which are basically just math formulas built into, they are essentially math formulas built into the CPU. And the newer the CPU, they just keep tacking on more and more instruction sets, which is actually a problem that will manifest result or like consequences someday. Yeah, but anyhow, the newer the CPU, the more of these things it will support. If I have a CPU from 2018, and it supports with virtualization, it supports all of these functions. So, yeah, no issues there. So without further ado, let's go ahead. Oh, like I said, you need the copy of Windows. So you can go to microsoft.com/en-us/eval center. So, I'll try to include links to this and this in the notes under the video. And you can actually get access to quite a bit of their software. You can just download it. We're going to click the Windows Server. We're going to go over here, down to Windows Server again, and then Windows Server 2025. This will give you a little bit more information about it. It tells us that once it's installed, you have 10 days to connect it to the internet so it can activate itself. I believe somewhere in here it says that it is active for 180 days. Okay. This evaluation edition expires after 180 days. We'll talk more about that later. But 180 days is a nice long time to, that's what, like 4, 5 months, 6 months. And if you're just doing this as a lab to learn, that should be sufficient. and there are things you can do, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So now you have your ISO. I already have all of this software installed or downloaded, so I don't need to download this again, but you just click here and it'll start downloading the ISO file. And once you have the ISO file, drag it somewhere on your computer other than your downloads folder, because you're going to want to keep it. Put it in a folder in your My Documents or however you organize your shit. Then you're going to go to the virtual machine manager. Up here on the left, upper left of the window, there are these buttons that aren't exactly obvious what they do until you highlight over them. Oh yeah, extensions. I think this is where you drag that file or you hit install here. Yeah, that's how you do it. Anyhow, so we're gonna go down to not hard drive, not network, machines, exchange, media. Yeah. We're going to the media, so that little hard drive icon is actually correct. And then we're gonna go over to optical discs, and you'll see this icon changes depending on what you're looking at, what category you're looking at. We're looking for optical discs, and then you're just going to go ahead and add, and then you're going to go to wherever you stashed that Windows 2025 server eval ISO, and then you just highlight it and you hit open. Mine's already indexed, so we won't do that, but it'll just add it to this list. And we're going to need this in a little bit for actually setting up the virtual machine. So then we go to machines after we've done that, and we go to new in the upper left corner here. And that's pretty straightforward. And then we got to name our new virtual machine, Windows Server 2025 demo. Okay, and then this is where that media index comes up. And then we are going to go ahead and not that, but this. Select the ISO that you added to the media manager, little library. I'm going to turn this off. I never use unattended installation. The few times I've tried, it doesn't work, so I just turn it off so it doesn't complicate things. Once you turn it off, for whatever reason, there's a bug. It normally is very good. VirtualBox is normally very good at selecting the version, OS version, based off the ISO you use, but for whatever reason, it's confused on this one. So we just scroll down, select 2025. So name, location is another thing you can change. I'm going to change it to yeah, this one. And that just puts it, if you have separate drives in your system, that can be very handy because there's a read-write bandwidth. Just the way there is with network bandwidth, there's bandwidth from the drive to the system. By using a secondary drive for the to house the virtual machine and its virtual hard drive, you cut down the competition between the host operating system, so in this case Windows 11, and the guest operating system, in this case Windows 2025, Windows Server 2025. All right, so we have this initial thing set up. Next, we're going to go with virtual hardware. Like I said, the requirements are pretty forgiving. So I'm just going to do 4,256 gigs of RAM. That is sufficient for our demo today. You know what? Let's just do 9,000 so I don't run out of. Well, you should be doing this. There we go. And by the way, you don't have to do for the RAM. You don't have to do the amount that a RAM stick would have. You can put any old number in here, up to nearly all of the RAM for the machine. Obviously, these lines are this red line and orange line are here to remind you not to do that, not to go too far. The next thing to do is CPU cores. I did try this on 2 cores last night and it works fine, but in the interest of time, I'm going to put it up to 4 cores. There is somewhere in here there may still be an execution cap limit. What that does is it makes it so that it'll only use a certain percentage of the cores that you select for it. The software itself recommends you don't do that. It recommends is you control it with the number of cores that you're going to give virtual machine access to at any given time. It won't be like, okay, there's 4 cores, so I'm going to do 0 through 3, and just stick with those ones. It just says I won't do more than 4 threads, and Windows allocates where those 4 threads are spread across the core count of the CPU. So some of them will be, if you watch the network or the task manager when it's working, you'll see it jump around to the different cores. And then the next thing we're going to do is here. This is another place where we're going to want to adjust where the file is being stored. So we want to go ahead and put this next to our VM guest, in our VM guest folder next to the machine files. For our demo today, 50 gigabytes is fine. You'll see there's a pre-allocated size chunk or click here for making it just one giant file. That can be handy for file management. It helps you not, because otherwise it gives this .vdi file will be like 4 megabytes or something like that. Like it's tiny. And then we'll expand out to this limit you set. That is nice because if you have multiple machines running and you're not sure if you're ever going to actually fill it up, that allows you to have elasticity, which is great. But if you need to make sure you never fill your hard drive up so much that you can't expand your VDI file, you just go ahead and do pre-allocated. It's a thing you can do. It's not inherently good or bad. Yeah, that's most of that. So we're gonna go ahead and hit finish. There is another setting that you can play with. And let's go down here. This one just makes, this one tends to make things run better. It's under the processor tab inside the settings. So like, once you've gone through our little wizard that we just went through, you want to select this, just one click, and then hit settings, and that will allow you to be a little more granular with your settings. So very near the top, there's going to be processor. This right here is, I've noticed, I don't know exactly what it does, but I've noticed that it does run better. Most virtual machines do run better with this enabled. And then aside from that, the only other tweak that you may want to make is you go down to networking. You can have up to 4 adapters, so have fun. But NAT is the default. And what NAT does, what this setting does, is it creates a virtual network inside your computer, and then a virtual router that connects your virtual network inside your computer to the actual network the computer is on. And it just becomes another layer of like IP management stuff, or port management, really, because obviously you only have one public IP address for your house, and then if you want to, have more than one computer for that, then you can't. You have to use port address translation, which I think is what this actually is. I think they just call it NAT. But yeah, basically, instead of letting the host on your home network determine which ports to talk to the internet with, the router figures that out. And this just adds another layer of doing that. And one of the reasons to do this is that when you have this box checked, the virtual router and the computer won't, because of how networking works, there isn't a default route between the virtual network on your computer and the rest of your network at home. So it kind of creates like a almost like a VLAN. Not quite though. But the other thing you can do is use bridged adapter, which took me a little while to find out that this does this, but it's very handy. So if you select bridged adapter and then select the adapter you have with the internet, you'll probably just have like a Wi-Fi and a hard line Ethernet. Um, just select the one that you use the internet for. And what it does is it allows the computer to have the virtual machine, the guest, it allows it to have its own IP address and MAC address on your home network or wherever you're doing this. Um, that is handy for routing and port forwarding. It also means that if you want to do file shares across the network, it puts it on the same network as the host machine. I'm not aware of any particular security issues this might produce, but it does give it its own MAC address. And you know, it's kind of neat that the single network device in your computer can have two sets of MAC addresses and two sets of IP addresses, and the router and the switches require no additional like configuration for that, because all it knows is that if it wants to route something to one IP or a MAC address, well, if the switch wants to send something to one MAC address, that it will send it down a particular wire, and if it needs to send it to another MAC address, it sends it down a particular wire, and if they're the same wire, it doesn't care. It's fine with that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do NAT, though, because this is a temporary thing, and I don't want to clutter up the logs on my router with more host names. So yeah, this is just something optional to play with. And then that's all we need there. And then we can go ahead and start it just by double clicking it. And see, this is where the interface for VirtualBox is kind of retro and not in a good way. Well, it's an all right interface actually, but like the log for messages, it appears just on the right here. It's where your error messages will show up. All right. So you'll see that there's a right control key down here. This won't be relevant for Windows because the latest versions of Windows are already have some integration with VirtualBox. But if you use VirtualBox for something else, a lot of operating systems, when you click in here or click a button in here, whatever interacts with this virtual monitor in any way, it captures the mouse and keyboard, and you can't, get the mouse outside of the box. So you have to push the right control key in order to regain access to the rest of your computer with your peripherals. And if you don't know to look in the bottom right corner and see what your host key is, you might wind up just having to restart your computer, because there's literally no way I know of to get out of it other than that. So since we selected the ISO file, the installation disk, during the wizard to set up the virtual machine, it automatically loads that when you start the virtual machine, which is basically just a very bare bones computer. So we're just gonna go ahead and hit next, unless you need to modify these for your region. And then obviously, if I'm going with that, I'm going with this. This is the next part that people get scared with. I had a friend who was doing some work in school, and he needed a virtual machine, and he kind of panicked, and it was kind of a minute to talk him into trusting me. And you'll see here in a minute that it won't do any harm. It warns us that installing this on this computer will delete everything on this computer. When it says that, it doesn't mean the host computer. It doesn't mean, in this case, Windows 11. It means that VDI file we made and put in a special location earlier. because that's a virtual hard drive, and everything in there will be erased if there is anything. It's empty, so it's fine. We're just gonna go ahead and click go ahead, I agree, and then go ahead and hit next. There are multiple versions available. I don't remember the difference between data center and standard. What I do know is that standard, uh, without the desktop experience, is basically just a command line. It's very bare bones. If you know how to use that, you probably don't need this video. So we definitely want to click desktop experience. That will give us a very familiar looking interface. Okay, scroll down, accept. Okay, and then this partition manager, you can do like, you can attach multiple virtual hard disks if you have the need, and then do partition management in here. But if you just select an unallocated drive in the Windows installers and just hit next, it will automatically figure out how it wants to set up the partitions for you. And then one last check. And this will take a while. So while this goes, let's talk about, so if you have some sort of project you're working on and you're just kind of doing it for fun, and then you get to close to 180 days and you're like, well, shit, I don't want to lose all my work and I don't want to have to just reinstall Windows and do it all again, but I can't afford the 4-digit price tag of a Windows Server. There is another option. And they call it gray market. It's not quite black market, and it's not quite on the up and up. But Microsoft doesn't say anything about it not being on the up and up. It just doesn't really appear to me totally legitimate, because the cost of a Windows Server key is pretty fucking cheap on some of these websites. These are 3 sites that I have used in the past to buy software activation keys. This one is g2a.com. This one is kingwin.com or .net. And this one is CJS CD Keys. So I am not guaranteeing that you will get a good deal on here and that you won't get ripped off by one of the sellers they contract through. I'm just saying these are ones that I go to first when I'm looking for software keys. And I figure they're mostly volume license keys. Most of them are single use. That is, if you need to reactivate Windows Server or you delete your version of Windows Server that you already have and install again, you can't use the same key again. Yeah, if they're illegitimately acquired in some way, Windows has the ability to reach out and deactivate the installation. I've never had that happen to me. I've never heard of that being done, but I do know it's possible. So it's good to have some due diligence and research the sellers if you can. And if you feel bad, just as a related note, Microsoft is worth almost $2.8 trillion. And if you're just doing something at home or just a personal project, I mean, if you're running a business, I would not recommend using these, because that chance that they might reach out and deactivate your copy of Windows because of how the key was initially acquired, I wouldn't put anything professional in the hands of that. But yeah, this is 100% an option. And you can see Kingwin is a little more expensive, and I don't see any for 2025. I see them for 2022. There's one for 2025. I used to use Kingwin a lot. They had like a rewards program that just kind of stopped working one day. I'm not so sure. I mostly go to G2A now, and then this one I have used on occasion with things that are hard to find. Occasionally they pop up on here. Another place you can look, although it's very unlikely they will have this, but they have other software, is woot.com, which is a subsidiary of Amazon, where they resell things that they have just too much of. And you can go over to the software tab and you'll find all sorts of interesting shit in here. Sometimes they'll have Windows 11, so I imagine it is possible that you can get a Windows Server, or like, you know, you can get Office if you're really into that, or Studio if you're really into that, or whatever. Don't get antivirus if you aren't. You probably don't need antivirus. Anyway, so let's check on that installation and see how we're doing. It's still going. We're about halfway there. So, yeah. And then, you know, it's kind of a process. It takes a bit. One of the things that I ran into last night, because I did an installation just to make sure I knew what I was doing, is it sometimes will black out the screen. A couple of times it blacked out and had to be manually restarted. The way I determined that it wasn't doing anything is I looked down here, and these green lights, if there's no green lights here, or and there's nothing happening over here, then it's hung up. If we run into that, I'll show you. It's pretty straightforward. You just you try a few things and see if you can gain control of it. And if you can't, just go to machine and reset. If you did that, like if I did that right now, it would just break the installation. I'd have to start over from scratch. And another thing is, at one point in time, a couple of years ago, maybe, I tried using Windows Server as a daily driver. I come from Linux, the Linux side of computing. I've been using Linux for most of 20 years, primarily, actually, due to schooling and getting ready to go into the workforce again. I have had to switch back to Windows for my primary machine in order to have compatibility with bits of software, but that doesn't, I don't know, software is as good as it is useful. So I try not to be an elitist about software choices. But anyway, I tried using it as a daily driver, and I found that there are consumer pieces of software. By the way, you don't have to hit anything here. It'll automatically do what it needs to. There are consumer pieces of software and drivers that just do not work on Windows Server. I believe that's done more or less intentionally, in order to kind of keep the consumer and professional markets like really separate. I don't appreciate it, but in Linux land, it's like you can get a Linux server installation going and then be like, you know what, I really want a graphical user interface, and tack one on. And it takes a little bit of doing to make it not broken, where a lot of features don't work. But like in the Ubuntu side of things, is actually pretty straightforward. And I believe the same used to be true for Fedora. I don't imagine it's gotten any harder. So yeah, you really shouldn't try to use this to replace, even though we're going to see in a minute that you don't need a Windows or a Microsoft account, and it doesn't have a bunch of smart crap built into it. It will just give you a lot of trouble. For instance, I tried to use a capture card, and it would not take the software. So yeah. And then I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this here probably, so you don't have to. So I can run out of things to talk about. This might be the part where it hangs. Looks like it's still doing stuff. Well, I'm just gonna wait. How about that war with Iran, eh? Eh? What about dying in a nuclear holocaust? Does that sound fun? I don't think it sounds fun. It is an option, though. Still watching the little turtle. Looks like it's leveled out. Nope. It's trying to do something. It's just not trying to do it in a way I can see. Yeah, it's always sketchy having to do this here because it might break the installation. So I guess wait a few minutes if you get here. And if it doesn't do anything, then go ahead and go to machine and then reset and reset it. And that's essentially the same as unplugging a computer and plugging it back in. I think what it is it's supposed to restart then, and it just doesn't for whatever reason. That's one of those bugs that I was talking about earlier with the not having the extensions installed in the beginning. So the nice thing, here we are, no Microsoft account required. We'll do your standard CompTIA password. Do not match, cannot type. Just do lowercase the whole way. If I did it wrong again, nope, I did it right. Okay, so this is important. If you just try to hit Control Delete right now, it will bring up the Control Delete for the host computer. What you have to do is you have to go up to Input, Keyboard, then hit Control, Insert Control Delete. And that will give us an opportunity to enter a password. It'll do its initial configuration here. We're going to let it go ahead and finish this process. Oh, yeah. Sure. Okay. I've never used this particular feature. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit Do Not Show Me Again. So this will always pop up every time you open Windows Server. This is like a control panel for a lot of features that are built in. It's actually pretty handy. We're going to go ahead and minimize it though, because we have something that needs to be done first. You go up to Devices, insert Guest Edition CD. This is those extra files, or that extra file you downloaded earlier. I believe you have to also go open it yourself. So it appears as a CD inside the system. Go here, and then wait for it to load. It's going awfully slow. It loads a lot of stuff in the background. These little indicators will turn red a lot of the times when you first turn it on. That's fine. It's just it loads things up in sequence. So I think I've waited long enough. Go down to AMD V box Windows, add additions, AMD 64. Next, next. We'll just go with the defaults here, and then this will tightly integrate the host and guest machines, and then we actually get like the full screen access. Okay, and then we just go ahead and reboot. And that should be the end of the weird bugs for a while. I have a copy of 2022 I use. Um, yeah, well, after I installed the extension pack, it never gave me shit again. Okay, go ahead and let this start up. These should turn red here in a second, and then after it's a little more warmed up. So like now you have Windows Server. What the hell do you do with it, right? Like if you have a specific goal in mind, you can just follow that tutorial or begin doing that process, whatever you're up to. But if you're just toying around and you want something to play with, we go up to manage. It's the same thing as this. You can just click here, but I like to use the menu for some reason. Add roles and features. Skip this page by default because who cares? It's a wizard. It just helps you do stuff. It helps you install and remove stuff. So you can manage Windows Server and clusters. I don't know how to set this up or entirely what this does. So we're just going to move on. And the top option is what we want for what I'm showing you. Role-based feature-based installation. And then this is back to that cluster thing. It can show you multiple virtual machines, or not virtual machines, multiple servers that you can manage from one server. It's very handy. And then this gets to the actual meat and potatoes of what you may or may not be installing. Pro tip: don't just install things randomly off of here. Actually, but don't install DHCP server, especially if you use the bridged adapter connection, because then it'll bring down your whole network until you turn off the server and start rebooting things, because it'll issue IP addresses from a range with a default route that doesn't match your internet connection. Anyhow, so if you want to just install some random stuff for funsies, this is the one I'd recommend. The IIS. Just go with the defaults. And this is basically a web browser and has some other services you can play with. Web server, not web browser. It will automatically populate this list for you with the changes that you've made. So unless you have something in here you actually really want to install as well, you don't really mess with this too much. Same for this. This will hang on. That's much better. This is basically what we click to install. So it handles all the dependencies. And then we don't need to restart anything. So we just go ahead and hit install. And this will take a few minutes. go ahead and get our web browser ready to go. I mean, Windows is really pushing Microsoft is really pushing their spyware. So you have to tell this thing a few times, the web browser, to just leave me alone. A dark theme because we're cool. Okay. And like, who's running a server who opens a web browser and wants to read the fucking news? Like, you're not doing that. You're Googling why something broke. So go ahead and minimize that while this works. The reason I opened the browser and set that up is we can do 127.0.0. If you don't know what that is, that's the loopback address. And now it's already gotten pretty far in the installation. If we had done this before going through the installation wizard, this would come back with an error message. But this is actually running on the virtual machine on the Windows server. And we just entered the IP address that you enter this on any machine, and it's basically telling the machine to ask itself over the network for whatever. But yeah, now we have that. This is almost done. Oh, looks like it's good. And that's it, man. Like, or lady, whoever, one person who watches this video. Now you have Windows Server 2025 set up in a virtual machine on your computer with a web host for messing around with. Oh, one more thing. If you want to play with settings, which is what this is about. Next to manage, you go to tools. This is where a lot of the settings for all the things in the machine are. Anything that you install with this menu is going to show up over here, as far as I'm aware. I've never run into anything that didn't. This is the Internet Information Services, the thing we just installed. Click that. And it will bring up basically everything you need to know, or everything you can mess with for the web server. I'm not familiar. I use Apache or what's the new one? Nix. But yeah, you can absolutely tinker with this to your heart's content. I don't know. It used to be my thing. I would make a web server every once in a while and make a website just for fun. So yeah, good luck. Have fun. Oh yeah. So I've done all that. You know what? Never mind. I'll get to it in another video. Thanks for watching.